Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Sandner, and I'm from Pembroke Publishing. And thanks for joining us today for our webinar on Better Teaching Now. This is kind of an exciting session because we're looking at the thoughts from four of our authors and really giving them some time to share their ideas around how do you inspire and support students in a very strange 2020 year, but also as we move forward. Now, I know a lot of folks joining us today are from Nipissing University, and it's great to have you here. And it's my understanding that many of you are just starting your career in the education profession. You will notice all of us are slightly older probably than you, so a little bit of experience. And I hope you catch today the passion from all four of our speakers. I've heard three of them speak, and that's my biggest takeaway is here are educators that have been in the profession for, I think I can say decades, and the passion that they bring for what they do and for engaging kids in the areas that they're interested in is admirable, and it inspires me every time I hear them speak. So I hope you have a similar experiences as we go forward today. Just before we get started, a couple logistics. Each presenter has about 10 minutes or so, and then there'll be a little bit of time for some questions after. I will monitor the chat because that's the way that you can communicate back and forth with us. And as many questions as we can fit into that period of time, we will. And just kind of get their thoughts on what you're thinking of as you hear them speak. So please feel free to use the chat, and I will try to capture as many questions as I can in there. If there are any technical issues, just start your chat with @Lionel, and that'll just be a way to flag it so that I can kind of go off to the side and help you there as well. So with that, let's get started. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Terry Campbell, who is a professor in the Schulich School of Education at Nipissing University. She's a storyteller and an elementary teacher before joining the Department of Teacher Education at Nipissing. Her work centers on theory and practice around reading, writing, and talk. She has traveled and published widely, presented workshops and papers on her chief area of interest and expertise, which is also focusing on classroom practices that effectively support students as engaged literacy learners. So Terry, it's great to have you here and starting us off today, and I'll just pass the virtual mic over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lionel. And hello, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names I'm looking at the chat line there. Hello, good to see you here. It's great to be here too with Anne and Larry and Kathy. What a pleasure. And I'm here as a co-author of the book, Literacy Out Loud, Creating Vibrant Classrooms Where Talk is the Springboard for All Learning. My co-author is Michelle McMartin, who is a local North Bay teacher. And many of you in my course have seen her in the virtual office hours. And I want to mention her because the book is all about her and her practices in her basically grade 3, 4, and 5 classrooms over the last few years, really. Michelle and I have worked together for a long time, and this book is the culmination of many, many talk strategies in particular. And they're all tried and true. So I'm going to use a PowerPoint to keep me on track as much as anything else. So there's a little bit about, yes, Michelle and I figured it out. We've actually worked together for even more than 10 years. And I really miss going into Michelle's classroom regularly because of the pandemic. I haven't been able to visit, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into her classroom and having fun with her and her kids. We started working together, and then over time, we just became more and more focused on talk and how important talk is in creating community and just being a catalyst for all kinds of learning, but especially, of course, in literacy. So the text is a range of activities and strategies that we tried in her classroom. Michelle does daily community circles, so we describe that. Tons of read aloud activities with lots of talk. There's a whole chapter on readers' theater, drama, storytelling. And so I only have 10 minutes, so I decided to just choose one storytelling activity to talk to you about today. My students will know the activity. They didn't get to do it on campus this year, but I'm going to show you a video from last year where the students did the self-portrait storytelling on campus, but we'll start with the kids. All right, so this is the activity. It's called self-portrait storytelling, and it's an identity building experience. So in this, the students are telling their own story and to each other, and then they help one another shape the story. We talk in general about the importance of storytelling in the first chapter. Storytelling is a line that goes right through the whole book, really. Of course, if it's a book about talk, it has to be about storytelling. And specifically, the self-portrait storytelling activity is described in chapter 7. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about that. All right, so there's what it looks like. There's two students of Michelle's who worked together as partners to create their self-portrait stories. And you can see what we used were empty frames, the kind that you would use for photos or paintings. And my husband sprayed them gold to make them really flashy. I have a sample here. So they just tell their story through the frame, and it just creates a focus. They have a lot of fun with it, and even the student teachers at a much older age enjoyed that too. So here they're just hamming it up, but I will show one of the stories in a few minutes, the story of the little boy on the left, although his partner helped him shape it, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So that's self-portrait storytelling, self-portraits in living words. And how do we start? Well, always start with a story, right? Any lesson, all literacy teachers know the best way to start is with the story. These are just 3 sample texts that could be used to launch the self-portrait storytelling activity. I Am Henry Finch is a good one. If you know it, it's about a little red finch who discovers his own powers and his own identity. On the upper right-hand side is a fox called Uko, who doesn't know that they're a fox, and so they have to discover their own identity through the story. Those 2 are both for younger children, but then the other one, A Museum of Me by Emma Lewis, is a lovely first-person account of, again, identity building. Now, these books aren't, they don't relate exactly to doing self-portrait storytelling the way we do in the classroom. They're just an inspiration. All right, so where do you go from there? Well, we did do some modeling, and I am going to talk about Michelle's concept of minimum modeling. But the idea is that the students are going to speak for themselves in any way that best expresses who they are. We did provide some prompts, but the stories went in all kinds of directions. In my teacher candidate classes, some students chose to speak in poetry and song. So that's a possibility as well. And the idea of minimal modeling. So when we set this up, we did come in front of the class and tell a really brief story through the frame just to give them the idea. But again, we kept it very minimal. Michelle's idea about that is that sometimes we over model the end product, and then that takes away from the creativity. So just some minimal modeling is really all that's needed for creative activities like this. And I'm going to show you in one of the last slides, a student teacher example where she unconsciously does minimal modeling, and you'll see why. So what happens is the students take turns in small groups. There's 1 frame for each group of, say, 6 or 4, and then they just pass the frame around and practice telling a story about themselves. And then after that, then they're partnered up, and then they film one another, and then they present an iMovie. And Michelle did allow them time to shape those self-portraits and create an iMovie that was a little bit more polished. You'll see one that was in progress. All right. So while the children were working, Michelle had an anchor chart posted, and she really stressed that these self-portrait stories can be based on these questions and prompts. And you'll see from the example that the little boy Colin didn't really even cover all of these, and that wasn't the expectation. These are just prompts. And in some cases, some of the children who were partners would actually make it almost like an interview where they asked the questions if the person behind the frame needed more prompting. So you can see these are just possibilities, and you can see that they're all designed to bring out the identity of the students.
Wait. Okay. I'm Colin, and I like planets, and this is about me living on this planet. My favorite color is green. My favorite food is shrimp and sushi. And my brother is named Jack. And my favorite game is chess. I love my mom, my dad, and my teacher. Everybody I know I like is everybody gets to heard.
Okay. All right. You see there at the end that Colin just ran out and he didn't know how to end his little self-portrait story. So what happened later was that his partner helped him to figure out a way to end it. So that's why the partner work really worked in this. So that was Colin telling his story, and then he polished that up a little more later. Okay, so that's a children's example. And I wanted to, oh yes, and you notice there was a lot of classroom noise in the background there. Of course, that's natural. So another way to get around that is to take the children outside. On that particular day when Colin was being filmed, it was a rainy day, so we stayed in. But on another day, Michelle took them outside and let them just kind of goof around with their frames and do some of their filming outside, and that worked out really well. And I wanted to stress too that this activity is really good for all ages. And as I said, the teacher candidates had a lot of fun with it. And there's on the right-hand side, there's a photo of one of the teacher candidates. I have them do this activity right in the first week. So a lot of them have landed in North Bay for the first time. They're at Nipissing University, almost not even knowing where they are in some ways. And it's a really good way for them to get together and know one another. We usually do the activity outside, and so they get to enjoy the beautiful campus. If you've been to North Bay, you know it has a beautiful campus with 100 acres of woods. And we go out and just do the activity outside and have some fun with it. And I tell them to just keep it really short. This is just to give you an idea and then to see what it's like, and then hopefully bring that activity into their classrooms. I know some of them have. So I'm just going to show the sample teacher candidate video right now.
Hi, I'm Colleen, and I'm a teacher candidate at the Nipissing University. I did my undergrads at the University of Guelph Humber in early childhood studies. My favorite book as a child was The Hungry Caterpillar. Why I want to be a teacher is because I want to inspire kids and I want to see their light bulbs go off.
All right, so that was just a sample. I had a whole lot to choose from. I just decided to choose hers because there was Colleen really literally not knowing quite which university she was in. But it also was a sample of that minimal modeling. She didn't say a whole lot. It's just she got the idea of what the activity was all about. And you'll notice it was just so much fun. They were having a lot of fun. The person filming her was laughing. They were all having a great time, and they all got to know one another through this activity. Okay, so that's self-portrait storytelling, and I'm going to give the last word from a student. And this is about storytelling in general. Jamie from grade 5 said, "I love seeing the look on other people's faces when they hear my story. I like getting help from my friends. It helps make the story better." And what more can we say? Thank you.
Terry. That was great. I was just sort of curious about the frame and sort of did that kind of that prop provide kids to feel more comfortable in talking about things, like to walk into a class, and especially if you're a teacher candidate, there's a new person in the room to share so quickly. Is that even an issue for younger kids, or do they just jump right into it?
Yeah, well, I think with older students, it really did make a difference. It made it fun. They almost thought it was silly at first, but then it really did open them up. With the kids, I'm not sure if it opened them up so much as just made it fun. But what they talked about afterwards was that they found out all kinds of things that they didn't know about their fellow students. So maybe it did open them up. It's hard to tell. But I think, it just again, it's like just switching the structure and making it into something new.
Yeah. The other part I found interesting, and this comes from a senior physics teacher and my work with elementary teachers, and the concept of an anchor chart is just not something you do in high school, but to see it as kind of it's not a prop, but it's just having that support. That seems like that would be a really important tool. Like that's my takeaway teaching senior physics. Yeah, no, I got to make sure I put up anchor charts now, right? Is that did the kids use that a lot, or?
It's like it's there if they get stuck, and you can see that in Colin's example, he didn't use it. He didn't need to. But when they start to talk, or even when they're starting to write and they get stuck, I do see them just glance up, because Michelle has them all over the room. They just glance up at, oh yeah, I could talk about that, or I could write about that. And
it's interesting looking at the chat right now. Terrelyn's talking about second-year candidates coming back saying, "Oh, I used that strategy," and Michelle is attaching it to a famous historical figure. So doing it once, it's just not a one-time event, but it's something that spreads out over and over again, which sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing that particular tip with us. And like I said, even as a senior physics teacher, you're sitting there thinking, oh, I know how I could use that. So that's great. So thank you. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Lionel.
Great. Thanks, Terry. Okay, well, it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker for today's session. Beside me, either on the right or the left, depending on, I think, what kind of browser you have, is Anne Elliott. And Anne Elliott is a teacher who's had experience from kindergarten to grade 8. And she has shared her passion and knowledge with teachers as a literacy learning coordinator, literacy coach, and librarian. She comes to us with a Master's of Education from the University of Western Ontario. And while she's an author of teacher resources and school board documents, she's also done workshops and supported educators all across North America, whether it be in workshops and speaking. And, I talked about passion at the start of our session, and I think you saw with Terry and oral language. Well, now I think we're going to focus a little more sort of on reading and writing, and Anne brings a huge amount of passion for that, and those important skills. And so, Anne, it's great to have you here today, and I'll just pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you so much. I apologize. I keep looking at myself. I've got a little bit of a frizz going on. I've come in off yard duty. And so for all you teacher candidates, yes, I've been out there slugging away on the yard duty, having everybody socially distance in the drizzle. But anyways, I am really excited to be here with everybody today. But candid, I feel like I'm missing my other piece, my co-author, Mary Lynch, who is a dynamic educator and currently is working at the University of Western Ontario with teacher candidates. So she's not able to join us today. But I'm joining you today from my office here at Lambeth Public School in Thames Valley, where I'm currently a vice principal. But the purpose of today's session is really hopefully to get you excited and kind of turned on around how you can create the conditions for kids to really be passionate about reading and writing. And all of this really the work that Mary and I have done that I'm going to share with you today in our books, Cultivating Readers and Cultivating Writers, stem from the fact that both Mary and I had system level positions, as Lionel had said. I had been a learning coordinator. Mary had been a literacy coach, and we both chose to return to the classroom. And so when we went back to the classroom, we started to see this new identity come out, this student emerge in our classrooms. We worked like our little keisters off, trying to create the conditions for our kids to be complete readers. And we started to say to ourselves, what does it really mean to be a complete reader? What are those skills and abilities we would be able to recognize and see, and our students would demonstrate in our classroom every day that would tell us as practitioners, this is a complete reader. This is a student who has the skills and the abilities to be successful. Well, you're probably working very diligently right now in Teachers College, gaining a lot of information and background knowledge and experience. And we like to say that sound pedagogy and really good practice makes an informed practitioner. So you're gaining all of that sound pedagogy and sound pedagogy through your classes. You're going out into classrooms and you're gaining that practical experience. But when we merge those two fields of understanding together, we make informed decisions in our classrooms. And as you can see, there's lots of different things that inform Mary and I's thinking in terms of the decisions we made every day when we went into the classroom with our students. And so we thought we could answer that question. What does it really mean to be a complete reader? Well, it certainly is a student who has the skills. And you're probably thinking right now, what are some of those skills that I would be able to see, that I could identify in the students in my class? And Mary and I were happy to see, that our students were skillful readers. They could comprehend grade level text. They could make meaning. They could answer text level questions and inferential level questions. And our scores on EQAO showed us that, okay, yeah, applaud, pat on the back. Our students were indeed skillful readers. But we also had to sit back for a second and start to have some tough conversations with one another about what we weren't seeing. So we were not necessarily seeing students who had the will to read. We didn't really see students, number one, who were passionate about reading, who were excited to read, who were able to even identify authors that they liked, series they enjoyed. They didn't talk about their reading with anyone else. And it seemed that without us, they weren't really passionate about reading. And so we stopped for a second and we said, well, we were able to teach all of the skills. We were able to create a skillful reader. Can we create a willful reader, a child that has the interest, the right attitude, the motivation, and the engagement to understand the lifelong benefits of being a reader? Because really, at the end of the day, what good are the skills if you don't have the will? Mary and I naively thought, and I think that we were in good company because lots of our friends said the same thing. They and us thought that if we just provided time every day for our students to read, and we provided them access to really engaging and awesome text, that our students would become passionate, willful readers. Well, they became readers, but they certainly weren't passionate. Well, we went back to the foundation. We went back to the curriculum documents and we said, okay, what are we missing? Like, did we miss something in our day book that we were supposed to be teaching something and we weren't? What's going on? Well, we know there's 75 expectations, which is a lot. The curriculum is certainly obese, let's be honest, and there's a lot of expectations for us to tackle as teachers. But how many of those expectations actually target reading? How many specifically target the skills of reading? And how many of those expectations actually target the will to read? So Mary and I poured over those documents and we were kind of flummoxed. We kind of sat back and went, what? What's going on? Zip, zero, zilch. Not one of the 25 reading expectations actually target will. Every single one targets skill. And so we weren't surprised that maybe that it didn't make it into our day books, but we realized very quickly that if we wanted to create passionate and to cultivate that will to read in our students, then we had to teach it just like we did the skills. So Mary and I decided that we would try some things in our classrooms. And that's really what we did. We did what good practitioners do all the time. We put our heads together, we collaborated, we dialogued with one another, and we created some lessons and activities. We knew we had to do it now. We couldn't wait. We felt that this was really key, especially when we looked at the EQAO data. And that's a piece of data that we can all have access to and take a look at. And we were not surprised to see that there's a 10-year downward trend across the province, that as our reading scores continue to go up, the skills of reading continue to go up of our students, there's a 10-year downward trend of students reporting on the student survey that they do not enjoy reading. And so we knew we needed to do something for the students within our classrooms, but also for our colleagues. And that's really where Cultivating Readers came from. So these are some solutions that we came up with. They're classroom-based. They've been tested and refined in our classroom, as well as lots of our friends across the system. And they've really become our core beliefs for developing and fostering the will to read in our students. Each chapter is divided into those beliefs. And so you're going to have a book that's kind of set up that gives you some practical hands-on strategies of lessons and activities that you can take back and try with your students. We believe fundamentally that if you want to create a passionate reader, you need to share your own reading life. You got to wear your reading love right on your sleeve. You got to know your students. You've got to get to know and triage those kids in your room and know who they are. You've got to model the habits of a reader, because there are very specific things that readers do that make us have those habitual acts. We have to understand what the benefits are of reading. We can't just tell our kids that they need to read. We need to show them. They have to be intrinsically motivated to read. And so we've got to show them why reading is so important. We have to create the conditions for kids to feel almost like they're in a bookstore sometimes. We have to create the space. When somebody walks in our learning environments, they need to see it on the walls. They need to hear it from our mouths. They need to know that this is a community of readers. And of course, it's not a crock pot. We cannot set it and forget it. We can't do these lessons in September and say, oh yeah, I took care of Will at the beginning of the year. Let's move on with the skills. We have to nourish that will all year long. And so the last chapter really provides you with lots of activities you can do throughout the year to build a passionate reader. So I thought it'd be really great to just harness the time that we have to give you a strategy that you could take into a classroom when you go into your practicums, that you've got a strategy that you can use to share your own reading life. So that's what I'm going to do right now. One of the strategies is called a picture of me. Students are going to hear and see right away how reading affected you at their age. So depending on what grade you're going into, whether it's 3, whether it's 8, whether it's 10, they're going to see and hear how reading affected you at the age in which they are. They're going to discover that you as a reader have touchstone texts that stand out in your memory that evokes a positive reading experience. And hopefully that's going to allow them to create a connection with you as their teacher, but also start to have conversations with their family and friends about texts that's really powerful to them. So there's me, 8 years old, waiting to catch the bus. That was the year that I truly became a reader. And so what you would do as a practitioner is you're going to bring in a picture. You're going to go through your old photo albums and you're going to find a picture of you and you're going to put it up in front of them, and it's going to create a lot of excitement and buzz, as this one often does when I go into grade 3 classrooms and I share my story of becoming a reader. And if you have access to the books you actually read, like you've got a mom and dad who save everything in a box, then bring in the actual text. But if you're like me, that maybe those are long donated to the Goodwill, you're going to just try to find the covers. The internet is a valuable resource to be able to find the cover that you remember as a child. And then you're slowly going to tell the story of you as a reader as you share each cover. And I'll just model that quickly for you right now. Here are some of the texts that I remember as a reader when I turned 8. One of the things that stands out in my memory is that the Golden Book. I don't know if any of you remember those as a child. My parents used to buy those books for us, and they, of course, were all these Disney stories. And one in particular was my favorite, and it was Snow White. I have jet black hair and very pale skin, and my dad used to call me his little Snow White. And as I would read that story, I connected with her, and my parents would draw connections between Snow White and me. They'd say, oh, Snow White loves animals just like you growing up on the farm. Oh, look at Snow White. She's so kind and she's so helpful. And I really emulated to be like her. That was also the year that I saw myself as a reader, because my grandmother was reading these books by James Herriot, who was a famous veterinarian over in England who traveled to different farms. And my grandmother would read his actual biographies. But that year at Christmas, she actually gave me a picture book written by him, and it was called Only One Wolf. And I identified as thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a reader like my grandmother. Look at this massive volume that she's reading, but I'm a reader as well. And we had great conversations about that text. The other big thing that year was I got a library card, and I was able to travel to the library, and I got hooked onto a series for the first time. And sometimes series are really powerful for kids, but I'm telling you, Christy had a great idea with her Babysitters Club, and it launched me on a reading journey of like 60 titles. But it was the next book that I read in the series of the Babysitters Club that changed me. My grandfather died the next year, and I read the next book in this series, which was called Claudia's Long Goodbye. And it was about Claudia losing her grandfather. And it was the first time I ever read a text and cried because I had made a connection. It was through a story that I could realize someone had the same experience as me. I encourage you to consider doing an activity like this with your students. It allows them to get to know you as a reader. And that's really what we want kids to know, is that you were a reader just like them and that texts are powerful. So here's an example of one when I taught grade 6. Of course, I had short hair then and the neon background because it was the mid 80s and early 90s. And again, you're going to see some great titles around there. But as a teacher, when I look at that picture of Brooke, it just makes me smile because I want Brooke to have that year. I want her to look back on her grade 6 year with me as her teacher and be able to remember those touchstone texts, those stories that captivated her, that changed her as a person, that opened her eyes to a different world, a different experience. And a picture of me is a really great activity for that. So think about the grade that you currently are going into, maybe for your practicum or the last one that you were in, a memorable reading year for you, and start putting down a few ideas about what are those texts for you that you remember. You know, I remember in grade 8, The Red Fern Grows, Mr. Zimmerman reading that text, and he cried when the dog attack happened. What are those texts for you that you remember? Those are the ones you want to share with your I'm going to transition very quickly, if that's okay. And Lionel, I hope you can keep me on track for time because sometimes time runs away from me. I'm just looking. If I need to go a little bit faster.
A couple more minutes.
A couple more minutes. After Mary and I finished Cultivating Readers, we realized very quickly that there was a need for writing as well. We were approached by Campbell, but also by teachers. Said, you know, there's so many similarities between what we're seeing in the skills and will of readers that we'd love you to create something about writers. And so we embarked on doing that. This is our most recent one. And again, it follows a similar format. What does it really mean to be a complete writer? What are we looking for from our students? You know, we see students who have the skills, so they understand the process. They know how to generate ideas. They know how to draft. They know how to revise maybe and edit and publish. They maybe are aware of the different forms of writing. They know about descriptive. They know about expository. They might know some of the specific formats like a letter, a short story, a recount. They understand how the traits of writing fit in, you know, sentence fluency, conventions, ideas. We might have explicitly taught them some craft techniques. And they think about purpose and audience. But we realized also that we had students, again, who did not see writing as a rewarding experience. They did not write without teacher direction. They did not write outside of the classroom. They required the topic, the audience, and the purpose being given by the teacher. They didn't understand that themselves, their life, is the source of writing potential. And they didn't truly believe that their voice and their stories mattered. And so Cultivating Writers is really our best attempt at providing some ideas and strategies and lessons for cultivating the will to read in your students. Again, we look at those curriculum expectations. There is zero, zilch, nothing that addresses writing will in the curriculum of the 25 writing expectations. But just because it's not there doesn't mean we don't have to address it, because we have to create skillful and willful writers. So again, it's our best ideas that we're going to share with you, divided into 6 different chapters. Each one is one of our beliefs. You as a teacher have to be a writer. There's no other way to say it. Jim Turlise, one of a literacy gurus, says you can't catch a cold from someone who doesn't have one. You cannot catch writing joy from someone who isn't a writer. And we all are writers in some capacity. So we've got to develop our writing life. We need to tap into our students' lives as writers. They have to see their lives as this endless source. We need to, again, model the habits of a writer, make the why of writing visible, know the tools of the trade, that everybody's kind of got favorite things that they write with and where they write. And of course, we need to nourish that will. So let's get a quick strategy for you to take with you when you go out onto your practicums, something you can do to kind of triage the students that you're going to be facing. Because I think time is of the essence. When you go into a classroom, we've got to figure out very quickly what are the habits, what are the characteristics, and what are the preferences of our students. You know, I want to know right off the bat if you hate writing. I want to know if you find it laborious. I want to know if you'd rather type than write. I want to know what topics you like to write about. I've got to triage you very quickly as a class to kind of figure that out. And the I Am a Writer Who poem is a really great strategy to do that, because it asks your students to do the heavy work of providing a writing profile for you. It's a great diagnostic to get to know them. So what we typically do is we set up charts around the room. We put out some stems. We always model for our students first, answering some of those questions, and we kind of scaffold that process. And we ask them questions like, where do you like to write? Is it at home? Is it by a window? Is it at your desk? What topics do you like to write about? Do you like to write about things you know, like say World War II? Do you like to write about animals? Do you like to write about hockey? Where do you get your ideas from? Is it from something you've watched on TV, or is it from your own life? What do you need as a writer to be successful? Does it have to be comfortable, quiet, and cozy? What are your favorite genres or formats to write? Do you have a preference that you always seem to write about? We want to get to know that about our students. So here's a sample of a little girl's poem that she wrote for us, and think of all the valuable information you're going to gain just from this quick activity. I'm a writer who likes to write about things I do and people in my life. I'm a writer who doesn't worry about spelling or punctuation when I first write. Love that. Downdraft writing, just get it down. We do not revise and edit till later. I'm a writer who doesn't like to make changes to my writing. Whoa, good for me to know. Revision's the heart of writing, as we all on this talk know today. They need to know the power of revision, that revision brings life to our writing. I'm a writer who needs it to be quiet to get my thinking down on paper. And I'm a writer who actually only writes at school. This piece of information provides the source for my first writing conference with a student to kind of show them that I am already getting to know them. Here's just a few other things we've gained about students and what they've been honest about and willing to share with us. But these are all teachable moments for us. All of this information can then, of course, be used in subsequent lessons of how we can talk to our students. So I hope that just gave you two quick strategies and maybe gave you just a little bit of a taste, an appetizer of what is actually in our two books. I want to thank Pembroke and Lionel and everyone else who's on this call for participating. And if any of you are interested, as I'm in a school right now and Mary's also at the university, we post things all the time on our Twitter account. So there's our handles in case you're interested in seeing and connecting with us further. But thank you so much for letting me share hopefully a little bit of my passion for creating willful readers and writers.
That's great. Good. Thank you, Anne. Just before you go, there was one comment in there. Michelle was talking about the will to read far supersedes the skill. And I was sort of struck by that comment. And I mean, it's woven all the way through this idea of that will. And, it in your experience, and especially, if I was a teacher candidate, I think I might think that I have to get to every kid right away, but I like your crock pot metaphor, right?
Yeah.
This is an evolution, not a revolution for some kids. I assume some just jump right at it, but yes. It's that blend of what did you say of sound pedagogy and practice to make informed decisions. So your resource is really something that's not a one-time use. It sounds like it's more of something you're going to use it all year long. Is that correct?
For sure. And I think that's what we see. Like, as you can see, I'm in my office, so I'm in a school right now, and I'm going to walk down the hall. And I think that we talk about, we need regular injections of reading passion. We have to ignite that reading will. So, today I've got my stack right here to show you. I'm going into a grade 8 class, and I'm going to sell 3 books as soon as we're done, because we continuously have to be igniting that passion and that will to read. I need to show kids that I'm a reader, and I need to share my reading passion with them and sell books to them, because they need to identify with everyone within our school community as being readers, and that all of us are on that journey. But I have a role to play in injecting that excitement and that energy for reading in classrooms every day.
Great. Very good. Thank you so much, Anne. I very much appreciate it. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Larry Swartz, who is a literacy and drama instructor at Oise University of Toronto, who has every time I've been in a couple presentations with Larry, and there's folks that know him and have had experiences with him, and they're always positive. And it's amazing to hear the impact that he has had both in drama and on the literacy side throughout the country. He has worked in classrooms as a consultant and a workshop presenter. He's been involved with teachers throughout North America, but also internationally with teachers in China, New Zealand, and interestingly, also Queen Noor's literacy initiative in Jordan. So Larry comes to us with that passion that I was talking about before, but a wealth of experience. And Larry, we look forward to hearing you talk over the next little bit. So I'll just pass the virtual mic over to you.
Perfect. I think you can all hear me. Apologize for the video not being shown. I bought a new shirt for the occasion, and you're not going to see it. But I'm going to stick to my 10 minutes, and I'm going to talk about my book, Teaching Tough Topics, and give you an overview of why that book and what I hope to achieve through that book. So I've been teaching for many, many years. I've been in teacher education program since 1998. Not that we're going to talk about me for the next 10 minutes, but I love working with my teacher candidates, for those of you who are participating from Nipissing in particular. So this week, just to let you know, I've been supervising virtually 24 students who are just finishing their practicum, and I love hearing about their experiences, and we had good chats about what is your takeaway from this learning. And many of the people from that 24 have been in my courses. And when they left on their practicum, I said, you must walk in with a literature source that appeals to you. I can't imagine going into a classroom without a picture book up my sleeve, or make that 2 picture books, just in case they said, we read that already. Of course, you can revisit a book. And then whether it's the novel or picture book or poetry, you find a book that speaks to you, find some books that is going to give you some inside and outside the book experience, and has them respond in a variety of modes. I can't imagine being a supply teacher, an occasional teacher, without having a book that's going to give you mileage. So I am about books. I've written many teacher education books through Pembroke about the using children's literature. This is a great book, and take me to your readers. But this brings me to my book, Teaching Tough Topics. So I was really excited about this particular resource because it framed my thinking going on with my students in particular in the last few years, and how I could narrow that thinking about, or deepen that thinking about, choosing children's literature. So the book is called Teaching Tough Topics, How Do I Choose Children's Literature to Build a Deeper Understanding of Social Justice, Equity, and Diversity. So the lens that I'm looking for is, when we choose those books that I talked about a few minutes ago, how do we make those choices to look at tough topics? Why tough topics? Surprise, surprise, we live in a challenging world. So we want students, we want to invite a respect for differences. We want students to understand the differences of others. We want to build compassion and understanding, emotional literacy, caring about others. We need in our classrooms to find a place of equity and belonging, which is in the subtitle, but also frames our teaching about equity and a place of belonging. And belonging is challenging. Finding that place of belonging in the classroom is hard. Finding that place of belonging in life is hard. So how can we make that community in our classroom where we respect the differences, using tolerance and respect for the differences of others? And then it also helps the kids expect their own identities. We have the mandated curriculum. So we looked at the curriculum documents on a couple of slides. You go into a classroom. We know we have to teach math, science, social studies, and let's not forget the arts. But with literature, we can bring the whole world in our classroom, and we can take the classroom to the whole world. When we use literature and talk about strategies, My favorite one, or the most top of the list for me, is making connections. When we make connections to the self, when we make connections to other books that we've read, and when we make connections to the world, we know that we are bringing significant literature into the classroom. And our goal is to create caring citizens. You're going to hear from my colleague and friend, Kathy Lundy, in a moment. We wrote a book called Creating Caring Classrooms. So it's about the need to bring caring citizens into the world, and that's why we do these topics. There are 10 topics. I'm going to read the list probably twice. So, sorry I don't have a slide, but just listen to this list. And as you hear these 10 topics, which are the 10 chapters of my book, think about which ones interest you, which ones intrigue you, which ones challenge you, which ones are you stressful or would be the most risk for you. Just think about these 10 topics and how it might apply to your own teaching. Race and diverse cultures, the immigrant and refugee experience, indigenous identities, the Holocaust, physical and mental challenges, poverty, death, loss, and remembrance, gender identity and homophobia, bullying, kindness. So if you have the book in front of you, which chapter would you dip into? And which one do you need some support? Race and diverse cultures, the immigrant and refugee experience, indigenous identities, the Holocaust, physical and mental challenges, poverty, death, loss, and remembrance, gender identity, bullying, and chapter 10 is kindness. They all intrigue. So my goal in this book is to provide you literature sources, and there's great book lists for each of these topics. And I've given you instructional strategies how to use both in the primary and junior intermediate classroom. So it's just a question that I love to think about in my classroom or on a Zoom meeting. I would have you share which one of those intrigue you. But as I chat, I want you to at least think about that. So why choose children's literature anyways? Well, children's literature does help us make those connections. I already punctuated my little chat by talking about the world of connections. We need to raise questions. So even looking at one of those topics, what questions do we raise about the world and about ourselves? We have to have meaningful discussions. These books provide opportunities for that meaningful talk that we learned about earlier in our webinar today. We learn about the identities of others through the books. And why do we want to do that? So we can think about our own identities, reflect on ourselves. And these books provide narratives. Whatever book you're going to choose, particularly in these topics, are case studies for examining some of these issues. So these books are artifacts for meaning making, where we want to talk, write, read, do some exploration of media inquiry, and of course, arts exploration. To finish off my chat, I could talk about books, and that would take us right till 3 o'clock today, because I love talking about books, and it's something that the students know about me. I'm always giving them book lists. And I just want to say you are getting a thorough book list from me that will be sent to you either through Lionel or Terry. And if you want a little slideshow as well. I didn't have a slideshow that I was going to show today. I just want to highlight a few titles that are on my surrounding me at the moment. Picture books, so you'll just have, and these are all going to be listed for you. But A World of Mindfulness is a book that where you use our senses and find your calm is the subtitle. This is a book by Pajama Press, and the different authors, illustrators help us look at mindfulness. I Talk Like a River by Jordan Scott, illustrated by Sydney Smith, who just won the Picture Book Award for the Canadian Children's Book Centre. This book, I Talk Like a River, is going to get a prize this year. It's a staggering book with beautiful illustrations based on the life of the author, who I was going to say coped with or was challenged with being a stutterer in life. And he didn't want to speak out. And so this book uses the river as a metaphor. And I think I'm going to give that book to President-elect Biden. The Other Side is a book that my students recently used. It's a black girl swinging on a tire, looking at a white girl over a fence. So I use this book to talk about racism and diverse cultures. We Are Water Protectors is a stunning, stunning book looking at the environment and indigenous culture of taking care of nature. And I'm very, very fond of that book. There's a handful of picture books that I just want to highlight. And in my chat, I can't not talk about novels. Every student, grade 4 to 6, grade 4 to 8, must read Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes. There's a novel. On page 1, a black boy is shot by a white policeman. He goes up to heaven and he looks down at the trial of the policeman, and he meets other characters up in heaven, other black youth who have been abused by in different circumstances. For example, he meets Emmett Till. Ghost Boys is a very important book for our times, and I think that is one that, if give me a classroom, it'll be one that I share with students. Another one about Black identity, I think this is the best novel of the year, Becoming Muhammad Ali by James Patterson, the #1 author for young kids and adults as well. And Kwame Alexander, and it's written in free verse poetry, and it's written in narrative. And these two authors have given us the biography of Muhammad Ali when he was Cassius Clay. But it looks about growing up and how he, as a Black youth, tried to cope with life and overcome and be tenacious about his goal to being the greatest. And I can't mention a book talk without mentioning Merrick Walters, #1 author in Canada. He's written more books than any other author. He's prolific. He's written picture books and novels. And imagine he wrote a book called Don't Stand So Close to Me. He's since written 3 new books, but Don't Stand So Close to Me is about kids involved in the pandemic. And how do the kids make sense of that world, these junior kids? All those books will be listed on a book list to you. How can we not draw attention to Black Lives Matter, no matter where you're living, no matter which classroom you go to? I use that as an example of approaching race and diverse cultures. But in our classrooms today, how do we bring the issues that are happening in the media, in the world, in the kids' lives into the classroom? I worked very, very hard to prepare lists for picture books, nonfiction, middle grade readers, and YA. You're going to get that list. But that's an example where I think it is our responsibility. And one teacher said to me, I just don't know what to do, and I can't do it because I don't know what to do. And so you might approach that with any of these tough topics. But I think it's our responsibility to bring that into our classroom. Let the questions come from the kids, and you don't have to have all the answers. And chapter 10 of my book is about kindness. And here's just a little aside. My editor said to me, she said, Larry, why is that going in a book called Teaching Tough Topics? Is there anything tougher to teach than kindness? So you might not see it as a diverse theme, but I think we have to bring that sense of kindness. And I have many books that talk about bringing us together. The introduction of my book is by Deborah Ellis, and she talks about children's literature being a new way of looking at the world. This came from her speech that she gave when she won an award. And at the last sentence of her introduction, good children's literature is not the sole key to a sustained livable future. It's not the sole key to a sustained livable future for all, but it's certainly one of the keys. So anytime you chat with me, and we heard from other 2 presenters, you hear about books, and we're going to talk about the sustained livable future from my friend Kathy. Thanks for listening to me, and if you have any questions about those book lists, you're welcome to connect with me. Thank you, Lionel.
Larry, that was great. Thank you. It's too bad, folks, if you haven't seen Larry speak before, if his camera wasn't on, because all those books that he listed, he probably has them right beside him, and he would be showing you the covers as we go through it, and you could probably catch the passion for books that he has within his voice, but it's also in his presentation as well. So know that list is coming. The key, Larry, maybe we can just kind of quickly ask you one sort of question there around the literature. That seems to be for you one of the keys, is there's always books around.
I introduce why we want to do this topic. That's my introduction. In each chapter, there's an expert voice. So I used an Indigenous author to talk about teaching Indigenous culture. My colleague wrote for the Federation a resource about poverty. So I turn to expert voices. But the heart of the book is start with the book. So using children's literature. In each topic, I choose 2 different resources, explain what the goal is, and I've given you instructional strategies, often with reproducible masters. So there's a very practical aspect to that. And I've given you choice whether it's appropriate for element like primary, junior, intermediate, but it's very, very practical. And each chapter ends with a book list. In a nutshell, if you're worried about these topics, if I didn't emphasize this in my chat, the messages start with a book. The book will carry you far. I recommend books, find books that speak to you, and I recommend there's strategies throughout to answer the question that was in chat. Thanks for listening.
Perfect. Thank you, Larry. That was great. Okay, well, it's my pleasure to introduce our last speaker for today, and thanks for everyone for staying. We are going a little bit longer than our hour, but it's been great so far, and it's nice to have you finish off for us, Kathy. So welcome. For those of you that haven't met Kathy, and I noticed B was one of your students in the chat there, so that was great. Kathy is a teacher, consultant, and speaker and educational leader committed to inventive, inclusive teaching that impacts on student achievement. And that's a big task to carry through. But I can say, having been in your sessions, that's exactly what you achieve in your practice, and that is very impressive. And you've been an author of many books for teachers and involved in the development of curriculum documents and videos on many aspects of learning. So we're looking forward to the next 15 or so minutes with you. And thanks so much for joining us. And I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Well, hi, everybody. And yes, hi, B. I haven't seen you in about 45 years, but it's great to know you're out there. And I'm really sorry you didn't get to see Larry. And, in this pandemic, I miss all sorts of things, particularly my family, but I also miss restaurants. And Larry and I used to have done this so many times where he introduces me to a book in a restaurant and holds it up and reads it to me, and we role play with it. It's so ridiculous. But the waiters and waitresses are very calm and wonderful. So, you'd love to, I'm sure his shirt did look great. So anyway, it's great to be here and to be seen. I hope I can be seen. Pembroke has asked me to talk about 2 of my books, and I know that I'm talking to people who are beginning to teach and are worried about how to do it well. And I'm here to tell you that the only way you really, really learn how to teach is to teach and to make the mistakes and stand up the next morning and reconfigure things in your mind and try again. So one of my books is called Stand Up and Teach, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to be quick. And the other one is Teaching Fairly in an Unfair World, which is the 2nd edition of a book that I wrote about 12 years ago. And so it's been updated. And at the end of the book, I write, it's so sad. I write about, looking out on a empty Toronto street. It was just in March, just when we began all this. So hopefully both books will help you figure out how to establish relationships with your students in such a way that their diverse lives are honored and that you become a partner with them in having them learn about themselves and the world in which they live. that they find their voices and that they celebrate and begin to understand not only themselves, but also their friends and their families and the cultures that surround them. So it is a book. Both books are about setting up relationships in the classroom, which are so key to doing the work that Larry's talked about and Anne has talked about, and Terry, that we have to have these solid relationships. We have to help kids understand who they are. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about Stand Up and Teach. I mean, I'm a Twitter nut. So I have pictures on my computer of kids who go on their first day of school and their parents dress them up and send them off. And this is how it used to be. But anyway, and so there's a picture of a little boy going off to his first day of school. And people dress their kids up in party dresses and stuff like that. But anyway, never mind. And I love the look on this kid's face because he has no idea what awaits him. And I always remember, and I don't know whether you were in my grade 9 class, but the very first day I taught, I was so nervous. I was handing out TTC forms and I was shaking. I didn't even know what the TTC was. I was from Montreal, but anyway, I figured that out. And this boy at the back of the class, Stuart Lush, said, "Relax, miss, you're not going to last very long if you're this nervous." And, I love that story because nobody really gets how difficult and complicated teaching is, except for maybe this little girl. I played school with my brother last night, and let me tell you, I have a whole new appreciation for what you do. And I think the world, because of the pandemic and because of what has happened in our teaching learning dynamics, in online teaching and in-school teaching and hybrid teaching and all the stuff that's going on, I think people are beginning to realize how very complicated and difficult this work is. So if you're a beginning teacher, I'm saying to you, you start where you're at now. And over the years, you're going to learn from reading books and from coming to workshops like this. You're going to throw stuff out that you started to think you should do, and then you are going to start new stuff and try that. It's all very important that you try and figure it out as you go. And in my book, Stand Up and Teach, I talk about lesson and unit planning. And I talk about the dichotomy of this. The interesting thing about teaching is that you have to have a solid plan in front of you. We all are asking our teacher candidates to have a plan of what they plan to do. But the dichotomy of this is that you have to be prepared for the unexpected so that you change course on the spot. And as you have more teaching experience, as you literally stand up and teach or sit down and teach on the computer, that you will begin to be able to react to that unexpectedness. So that's one of the dichotomies. The second dichotomy is this. We all know, and you've been taught this, and we're all learning how to do this, that you use backward design. You have to have a culminating task in mind. I mean, why are we doing this? What are we working towards? What is the highlight? What is going to be the end of all this? How are students going to see their learning in something that is some kind of product or some kind of understanding that they achieve? But you also have to begin in powerful ways. How do you begin your lesson? How do you engage the students? I was just listening to a podcast last night from some teachers who talked about that, how online feel that somehow they've lost their teaching selves. So they're beginning, as they teach, to figure out ways of sending a video to begin their lesson and say, here's who I am, and this is what we're going to do today, so that all kids have an opportunity to sort of see their teacher on video. anyway, it's an interesting idea. And the dichotomy of teaching number 3 is you need to imagine, how a lesson will unfold. I mean, my interest lies in artistic, interesting, imaginative experiences in the classroom and online. Artful teaching. But you also, and you're learning this as you do this, you have to be practical in terms of time, space, content, materials, differentiated learning, and student response. So there's, this is what makes teaching so difficult. We want it to be exciting and important and relevant and culturally appropriate. But we also have practical worries on our plate, and even more so now because we're doing so many different things at the time. So, in Stand Up and Teach, I help teachers, talk about how do you begin, and I think that's important. What are the first things that you need to know how to do? And I do talk about lesson planning. There's a whole chapter on that. And then there's a chapter, strangely enough, although I do believe teaching and classroom management are the same thing, on classroom management. And working with your mentor, finding someone who's not going to tell you to relax and it's all going to be all right, but finding someone who's going to say, yeah, you're in deep trouble. Let's figure this out together. And finally, believing that you can make a difference. Everybody sort of has provided a tip, and a classroom management tip that I care a lot about, and I am trying to do this online as well. It's just a little tip, but often what we do in classrooms is we lose control of the class when we start handing things out, right? And my little tiny tip is you talk about what you're going to do with the students, what the activity is, what the expectations are, what's on the handout before you hand it out. And then you hand it out. Because you've got everybody's attention, everybody's there saying, oh, yeah. And then you have an opportunity to hand it, and then the paper all flies around, etc. I do that online too now. This is what my expectations are. This is what I'm going to be asking you to do. There's no slide. And then there's the slide. Just a little tiny teaching tip. The book that has been kind of a culmination of my life work is, Teaching Fairly in an Unfair World, where I feel this really strongly. And Mary Jean Gallagher, the former Deputy Minister of Education, said this at a conference where we were both keynote speakers. She said, there are no disposable children in the world. There's nobody that's not going to make it if we have the chance to do this right. And during the first stage of the pandemic, I worked with a little girl. I phoned up a principal friend of mine and I said, help me help someone, because I'm sitting here, I'm going crazy. And I worked with a little girl who lived in an apartment. She had a few reading challenges, but we worked away at that. But there were times when we had to stop because of her uncle having a seizure in the same room, because it was a very small little apartment. So I think about that, that we have to look after this little girl as much as everybody else. And we have to understand the context in which our children live and learn. And we have to be aware of that. We have to figure it out. We have to find it out. And we have to do this because we have to look at issues of class, race, and power that Larry was talking about, that directly affect our students. Power in this case meaning class, poverty, etc. We have to look at that. And we can't assume that all our students are coming into the learning environment with easy lives. And we have to think about teaching as an act of social justice, where, you know, you give kids a sense of themselves, and that you have yourself a sense of who they are, and that you yourself have a sense of who you are. And that Anne Elliott exercise, you know, how did I become a reader? And how am I going to help my students who are learning how to navigate this? And where are we in all this? The sense of place. Where are we learning? Where are we going home to? One of the activities in the book is an activity that is connected to an activity I do with students. Is, you know, I wish my teacher knew this about me, but how do you find that out? And so I do a series of prompts. Just because I'm ... doesn't mean, and doesn't mean. And here are some of the responses that I've had from students over the years. Just because I'm Pakistani Canadian doesn't mean that I'm a Muslim. Doesn't mean that my dad is a limo driver. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be a doctor. Just because I'm shy doesn't mean that I don't have a voice. Doesn't mean that I can't hear the words you say. And doesn't mean that I am weak. Just because I pray at school doesn't mean that I am special. Doesn't mean that I'm a freak. And doesn't mean that I feel superior to others. Just because I'm Pakistani Canadian, why do you make fun of my accent? Why do you make me worry about the safety of my sisters? Why are you allowed to get away with this? This book is as connected to teaching tough topics as any, and they're probably good things to go together, because basically it's about a book which teaches you how to teach equity towards academic success. And in many of my books, I talk about the 6 E's of effective teaching, and I'm just looking at the time, so I won't go into that. But I do give 50 strategies that you might want to try with your students, because this is our work. There are no disposable kids in the world. So we have to figure out ways of embedding equity and culturally responsive pedagogy as part of the curriculum. And I define what that is, culturally responsive pedagogy, and I give ideas about how to use and work with that concept in your classroom. The broad themes are the same as Larry's. And you can take a look at those there on that slide. But finally, in the book, I refer to Wendell Berry, who I love. And I'm going to end with this poem, because I always end my workshops with a poem, as you all know, whoever has been in my workshop. And this is for teachers who are been teaching for as long as I have, and for teachers who are just beginning. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. We are impeded. We are baffled. And this is our time to do right by all our kids. Good luck to everybody. And thanks, Lionel.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you for that start, if you like, on our journey. And as you were talking, you know, I've made some notes around the dichotomy of teaching, and then the challenges of the topics that as a teacher you're expected to do. And we don't have the experience in all those. So, you know, a resource like yours does that. But I wonder if you just maybe talk for just a brief minute on sort of, okay, I'm on this journey. I don't know something about an area. I do a little bit of research. And then I have, I'm trying to find the words you use, in my imagination from my lesson, I see what's going to happen, but then the practical piece kicks in. and it kind of all blows up on me. Like, it's happened to all of us. The next steps, as I'm reflecting, I think as a teacher, I got to go back to that problem and that I had in my classroom and try to address it. But I guess I'm asking there in terms of those next steps this is a journey. Is there anything that we should be thinking about if we, go into a difficult area and it's we have trouble with it? What do we do next?
Yeah. We've all had kids run from our rooms. So I have what I outline in both those books is norms of engagement. Expect to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Stay with it.
Yeah.
And speak your truth. And Alison Games Sanvincense from the Toronto District School Board taught me that many, many years ago. That we have to say to ourselves, we are this, and that's where teacher vulnerability comes in. I speak about that in the books. You have to be able to say to them, look, we are entering a really difficult conversation here. I myself feel difficult. We have to sit and be with each other and listen to each other, and maybe start our sentences with, I'm not sure about this, but, or I was wondering if, or would it be all right if, that we tentatively begin to engage and know that there will be no closure. But
that's tough. That's really tough, right?
But that's the work.
Yeah.
That's the hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. No, that's great. Thank you very much.
This is a tough time, and it's tough stuff, but it has to be done.
I agree. And that's kind of a nice lead into Pembroke is offering, for those of you that participated today, a discount on any of the resources that we talked about today. So there's a little pop-up that's just showing up on your screen there that you're more than welcome to have a click and see what's there. But Kathy, Rebecca, just to go back to, because the comment you made in around that, Rebecca's just agreeing with that. So I think, what you said there speaks to a lot of us. So thank you very much for the taking the time to come in today and share your thoughts with us. And we look forward to future sessions as well, both with Kathy and with Terry and Anne and Larry as well. So with that, I'll say thanks to everyone. Thanks for spending a little extra time with us today, but I didn't want to stop anyone because as I mentioned at the start, the passion each of our authors brings to their books and to their profession is huge. And, I didn't want to lose that. So thank you for staying with us for the whole session. For those of you that are moving into practicums, good luck with it. Good luck on your journey. Welcome to the profession. For the few names I recognize there that have been with us before, I hope things are going well and it's not too crazy as we lead up into the holiday season. So thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day.